Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Angels, Fairies, and Witches. I'm Michelle, and once again, I'm flying solo because my co-host, Laura, is off on a Reiki seminar. So last week, I decided I was going to read some viewer mail. It's come to us, mostly phone calls, and I didn't even get halfway through. So I would like to take this evening to finish up some of the questions we receive. And I think they're very pertinent because a lot of these are questions that I get asked all the time anyway. So I want to go back. The last question that I answered last time was from a viewer named Dan, who wanted to know, how do spirits get into your house? And his follow-up question, how do you get rid of them? So I was mentioning how either they are people that you know that are deceased and simply like to come around your house, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, no special occasion. But also, they could be connected with the land, for example, American Indians, perhaps even the Civil War. They could be from objects that you bring in, generally not new objects that you buy, but if you're a fan of flea markets and yard sales and you purchase something there and you bring it in without cleansing, this is another way they can get into your home. Or sometimes they're just spirits who like your energy and kind of follow you home. They just like to be around you. I was asked previously, can spirits harm you? And the answer to that was 1,000% no. The only thing is they could be a little bothersome, sometimes. You'll hear the cabinet creak. You'll feel a touch on your skin. You'll see something out of the corner of your eye. If this becomes bothersome, it's very easy to answer Dan's question, how to get rid of them. Now, we're not talking about ghosts here, and as I said in the previous episode, ghosts are really few and far between. Spirits are very, very common. So let's say there's somebody that you feel there's a spirit in the house, and it's become annoying, it's become bothersome. You want to get rid of them. Very easy. You light a candle. I would always suggest white, simply because white is universal. It's good for any spell work you might do. Light a candle. It's best if you can have the house kind of quiet and just sort of mentally or verbally, except if you do it verbally, you always run the risk of looking crazy, or mentally just talk to the person. See if they'll give you his or her name. See if you can identify with them at all. And it's just like asking a person in human form to leave your house. You don't have to be rude about it, and you certainly don't have to be scared about it. Just say, okay, listen, Bill, it's time for you to move on. I've enjoyed having you here, but, whatever. Light the candle, and with love and intention, send them back on their way, okay? I'll tell you a little bit of history. Yes, I'm getting off the subject again. A little bit of history. The Halloween jack-o'-lanterns, in case if you ever wondered where they came from or why they were put on the porch, is because Halloween, well, for witches, it's actually pronounced Samhain, but Halloween is when the veil is the thinnest between the two worlds, between the living and the dead. And so a lot of people thought that would be the night that spirits would be walking around and they'd be most visible to the human eye. So rather than be afraid of them, our ancestors used to put the candle in the jack-o'-lantern and put it on the porch to help wandering spirits light their way. Ta-da! Wasn't that interesting? Okay, that's how spirits get into your house. That's how you can get rid of them. Our next question comes from a viewer named Tina. Tina wants to know if pets are psychic. Oh, you better believe it. Absolutely. I myself have, I'm trying to think, 6 cats. Sometimes it gets a lot out of control. I have 6 cats. My co-host, Laura, has a bird. I know people that have dogs. If you want to know if your pet is psychic, they would be the ones to see spirits long before you. Pets and children. Anyway, watch your pets. For those of you that have cats, okay, if you notice your cat will be sleeping on your lap, or because cats do a lot of sleeping, they don't do that much else, or maybe they're curled up on the rug, and all of a sudden there's no noise, there's no nothing, and all of a sudden they look up at something and go darting out of the room. They've just seen a spirit. Spirits don't always linger. Sometimes they're literally just passing through. I know Laura's bird, every time some spirit is in her house, the bird starts squawking and feathers flying. People have told me about their dogs that will bark at, they think nothing, but there's always something there. Oh, you know what? This ties in very nicely with the next question, which is from Adrian. She had a question about her child having, and for some reason it's finger quoted here, imaginary friends. Okay, well, Adrian, they're not imaginary, and I'm going to tie in pets and children. They are the most innocent of creatures. When you get to be in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on, sometimes you get bogged down by life. Sometimes you get jaded by things. It really clouds your innocent, pure nature from when you were born. That's why whenever you see a baby laughing and giggling and there's not nothing around, or you see a little toddler talking to an imaginary friend, or you see your pet look up at something and charge out of the room, can't tell you what they're seeing because there's just so much out there. There's obviously your dearly departed. I know when grandparents have passed on and then you start to have children, ooh, they love coming around those babies. They really do. Not exclusively grandparents, but it could also be angels. It could be fairies. It could be any number of spiritual beings. All good, all beautiful, nothing evil. Okay, so that's pets and imaginary friends. Okay, next is Angelique. Angelique wants to know, I don't know if this says how to send healing and protection or can you send healing and protection. All right, well, as far as can you, absolutely. And as far as how to, Laura is a Reiki master, so she certainly knows more about how to send the energy. I'm not, but I can even do it. And protection, let's say you have a child. Oh, goodness, one of my friends just sent her son to college in, wow, I was not really listening. Maybe it was Utah or Wyoming, like something at the end of the alphabet. Anyway, so of course here she is in New York and she worries constantly and she calls him 20 times a day and he answers about twice a day. And so rather than sit here and fret and worry and wringing of the hands, the idea for her would be to envision her son literally encased in a white, pure white bubble. I don't know if you could use other colors. I just think white is kind of universal for this stuff. Pure white bubble. And you can call upon, as we had mentioned in previous episodes, Archangel Michael. His number one job is protection. That's why he's the patron saint of the police officers. And he's good at what he does. So you can call upon him to stay with the child continuously. Let's say somebody in another state needs healing. Again, it's really visualization. Sounds easy, but it does take a little practice. For visualization, let's say you have a relative or a friend in another state, in another country, maybe, that's ill. You picture that person and do this at night before you go to bed. Get rid of all the things you've been thinking about during the day. Really, light a candle. Make it very devotional and ritualistic, I should say. So now you're going to picture the person that you care about. This time, though, encased in a beautiful emerald ball. Emerald, really like a very bright green. And with that, you want to call upon Archangel Raphael. He's heaven's physician. He's the guy in charge of that stuff. I don't think there's going to be this overnight miraculous healing, because the other person has to be willing and wanting to get better. You know, sometimes I even know people that have long-term illness, but I think sometimes they just think they're done. They're tired of this life and they don't want to go on. If that's the case, that's their choice. There's not a lot you can do about it. But you can always send healing. You can always send protection. Just remember these two important guys, Archangel Michael, Archangel Raphael. That's what they're there for. And they're not the only ones. I'm just taking these questions a little bit at a time. Sorry, still warm under these lights. Or maybe I'm just hot. Feel free to call in about that as well. Right, talking about the angels. Okay, I'm going to wait till Laura gets back for us to really delve even more into it. So I'm just kind of answering some quick viewer mail here today. Oh, speaking of angels, Isabel wants to know, is there an angel of death? Yes, Isabel, there is. It's probably not like you've seen on TV or in the movies. His name is Azrael, Azrael. By the way, quick point of interest, at least I think it's interesting, the reason all the angels' names end in EL or IEL, for example, Azrael, Gabriel, Raphael, Michael, Shamuel, Jeremiel, Raziel, Raguel, Jophiel, well, you get the idea, right? Is because the ending EL or IEL is Hebrew and it means of the light or from the light or being of light. But back to the angel of death. His name is Azrael. His chief function, he kind of is always surrounded by sort of like a golden light. And his chief function is that you've heard the stories again and again that when you die, all of a sudden you see the light, you walk towards the light. Well, in this case, Azrael is the light. And his function is really just to kind of guide you on over. At the time of your death, that's why he's known as the angel of death. But again, nothing, I'm fidgeting, aren't I? Nothing weird, nothing creepy, nothing in a long black flowing cloak. Definitely no horns and pitchfork. Okay, that's the angel of death. Did I answer all the questions on this page? Anthony. Anthony wants to know, why is the number 13 considered unlucky? That's a very good question. Personally, as a witch, I think the number 13 has gotten a very bad reputation, kind of like being a witch. 13 is the number that would make up a traditional witch's coven. There's 12 people and then one high priestess, so that's 13. Well, actually, Jesus did it with 12 disciples, but that wasn't considered bad. I know. I'm not going to soapbox here. Also, I had said in some much earlier episodes that the real history behind 13 and Friday the 13th in particular being unlucky goes back to the year 1307. And the Catholic Church had this elite group that they had formed called the Knights Templar, and they were in charge of guarding the church's secrets and money and things like that. And as time went on, the Templar Knights got a little big for their britches, and they got a little carried away with greed, and they started threatening the Catholic Church, saying, well, listen, unless you give us more money and more land, we're going to start talking. So King Philip, the yada, 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 in France, called all the knights, and he said, hey, you know what? Enough with the fighting. Come on over. Let's have a feast. Let's carouse, and let's all just get along. So the knights went over, and there was probably at their largest number, there was probably about 150 of them. Very elite group. And so sure enough, they ate, they feasted, they drank, they fell asleep. And very early on the morning of Friday, it was October the 13th, 1307, the knights were ambushed. It was all a setup to kill them. And so legend has it that about out of 150, less than 5 escaped. All the others were killed, slaughtered, actually. So these 3 or 4 Templar knights that managed to escape somehow eventually made it out of France and across the ocean to America, where it's now the group of the Freemasons. That's supposedly where they got their start. And I always wanted to infiltrate that. Freemasons. I'd love to know more about that. Anyway, so that's kind of where 13 got the idea of being unlucky. If you are a witch, if you are pagan, if you are druid, 13 is actually considered a very lucky number. There's a lot of these little superstitions. For example, you know, if a black cat crosses your path, it's bad luck. Well, I have 4 of them, so I would have like the worst luck of anybody I've ever known. For a witch, a black cat, well, I don't know about the crossing of the path, but is considered lucky. So, yeah, 13 is not unlucky. And you know what? I just want to say that, because I was mentioning witches, pagans, and druids, sometimes, bless you, that was my cat Oliver. Sometimes there's some confusion with being a witch and being Wiccan. Big difference, okay? Wicca, the following of Wicca, it has its same basis. It's an earth-based faith. They all are. Wicca, witchcraft, paganism, neo-paganism, and the Druids, because I don't know how to pluralize that. Druism? No, that is not right. Well, anyway, Druids. What seems to have happened is that people are, neo-paganism means new, modern paganism. And Wicca is the extraordinarily watered-down version of witchcraft. Nowadays, I'm sorry to say, things like referring to yourself as a pagan or as a witch, still not really all that acceptable. And quite frankly, no one seems to know what a druid is. They always think I'm talking about that little R2-D2 thing from Star Wars. But that's not a druid, that's a droid. Well, okay. A druid is similar to, not to Star Wars, to the witches and the pagans. So they've come up with some new age lingo, okay? So if you consider yourself a practitioner of Wicca, it means you're probably a vegetarian. It means you like to hug trees. It means you like to meditate and do yoga, and all that stuff is fine. That's wonderful. But witchcraft is definitely more intense. Witchcraft involves the spells, the potions, the ritual, which, by the way, no sacrifices. I don't even know where this stuff gets its root from, but that's foolishness. Same thing with being a pagan. This neo-paganism, it's the watered-down, more socially acceptable way of referring to yourself, but it's not the kind of old-school style that witches and pagans practice. And that is all getting back to why number 13 was considered unlucky. Okay. And so our next question comes to us from Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie. Stephanie writes, what happens to people that commit suicide? Okay. There are a lot of schools of thought on this. I know that there are a bunch of religions that would have you believe that to kill yourself, your soul burns forever. Want to guess what religion that is? This has been my experience, okay? People have come to me for mediumship, and sometimes there have been people that have committed suicide. First of all, they're not as easily able to communicate as somebody who has just died. They cross over real quickly, and they could be there talking to you and sharing. The suicides tend to take a little bit longer. There's no burning in the eternal flames, none of that crap. But perhaps I think maybe they have a bit more of an adjustment on the other side. And you have to understand, in terms of suicide, it's a bit of a broad spectrum. You have the people, the poor people that are that are so mentally sick. They see no other way out. They want to put an end to their daily mental torment. You have the others. I've had a bunch of people come to me with this problem where somebody was taking drugs, perhaps recreationally, perhaps to, calm their nerves or make them feel better about themselves. And then one day, some drugs become more drugs and more drugs and more drugs, and they actually accidentally end up killing themselves. And that was never their intention. It just kind of happened. And then, unfortunately, sometimes you have people that will do the, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. And then they do. It's never been anybody I know. They've threatened to, but they've never followed through on it. So I think it's all based on these different areas. All I can be sure of is that there's no burning in the eternal flames. Definitely requires more of an adjustment period when they've passed on. And what I further know is that sometimes they'll have somebody else who's deceased come and speak for them. So when they come into my house for the mediumship, I'll actually see the person that committed suicide, and standing next to them is often an equally deceased family member or loved one. And they'll be the ones doing the talking. I think I'll wait till Laura gets back. We have a lot more to say about suicides, but if any of you out there have experienced that or even had thoughts of it yourself, please don't for a minute think that you're eternally damned. I should have probably saved that question for the end. Wow. Okay. Well, you know what? I think at some point they're going to be showing my number and Laura's number. Certainly, if anybody out there ever feels so dark and so depressed, please call one of us. Okay, something a little bit lighter. Oh, this is from Lorraine. Oh, God bless Lorraine. Lorraine wants to know if fairies exist. Yes, they do. Remember Peter Pan? I do believe in fairies. I do. I'll tell you, there's a lot of things that are considered supernatural that if you really understood the context of where it originated from, it's a lot more normal than people believe. Fairies exist. Vampires exist. Werewolves exist. Not like in Twilight, although I wish that were true. Team Jacob. Witches obviously exist. Here's the thing, we're going to do a whole segment actually on fairies because it's called Angels, Fairies, and Witches, and I don't know why people have such an easy time believing the angels. Not so much the fairies, and not so much the witches, but we all exist. So I don't want to get too much into the fairies because I think the next time we meet, we're going to be discussing fairies, and at the end I'll show you how to make fairy dust, which, by the way, I'm wearing. The last time on camera, it looked like I was sweating. I wasn't. It's fairy dust, and I'll show you how to make it. Fairies can exist in two ways. This dimension or another dimension, okay? In the fairy realm, they're seen as creatures that are just like angels, but a whole lot tinier. And whereas angels are in charge of people and watching over them, it's the fairies that are in charge of plants. Oh, those are my cats. Plants and animals and the environment and nature. But I want to bring up something as well. I've mentioned before vampires and werewolves and witches. Oh my. People have misconstrued. I mean, as a witch, I feel that for centuries, my kind has been vilified and demonized, and we were made to be something we're not. We're not evil, and we're also not cartoonish. We're just very powerful, magical people who know how to access the different energies from the universe. Vampires and werewolves, they absolutely do exist. As a matter of fact, I should invite some of them to be on this show. The ones that I know are guys and quite hunky, but I'm sure there are female vampires and werewolves out there. But let me tell you, okay, in terms of a vampire, I definitely know vampires that go out into the sun. That's not the issue at all. That's Hollywood, okay? Here's what a vampire's energy can do. First of all, their personality type is that they like to be the center of attention. They think quick and they act even faster. They can walk into a situation where there's so much negativity. Now, you may walk into this by a negative person or in a negative place, and you come away, you've absorbed that negativity, and you feel really crappy. What a vampire's energy can do, they can walk in, and literally by their presence alone, they can remove the negativity. They will take it in, and it energizes them. It invigorates them. That's one of the chief purposes of vampires. So anyway, I want to talk about some more about how these different entities exist, because I'm sure you know some as well. But I'm going to wrap it up for now. Hopefully in the next episode or two, Laura will be back from her Reiki. So from Angels, Fairies, and Witches, this is Michele saying have a blessed evening. Hi, this is Michele again. Earlier in the program, one of the questions from Stephanie was about what happens to people that commit suicide. I would just really like to take this opportunity to share with you that if ever you're feeling that way, please, your first step should be to call the Suicide Prevention Hotline. We have the number posted on the bottom of the screen. You may want to seek professional counseling, talk to a friend, talk to a family member. Certainly you can call Laura and I, but I think that the first step should always be the Suicide Prevention Hotline. We take these matters very seriously, and hopefully anybody who's feeling like that can truly get the counseling that they need. Again, for Angels, Fairies, and Witches, have a good night. See you next week. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Angels, Fairies, and Witches. I am Michele. My co-host Laura is still unavailable. She's been doing a lot of Reiki sessions, so hopefully she'll be with us next time. What I've been doing these previous two episodes is I was reading some questions from our viewer mail, and I'm still not done. I hope this is not becoming boring. But we have a few more questions. These are what I think are pretty commonly asked questions. So I want to finish up with this. The last episode, right before we were finishing, let's see, a viewer named Lorraine had asked if fairies exist. And I said, absolutely. I want to start talking a little bit more, though, about the supernatural, because things that you consider, beings that you consider supernatural, we're not really that different. Fairies exist, vampires exist, werewolves exist, witches exist. But I'm going to tell you some truths about what they're all about. It's been suggested, if you look around at your friends, your family, neighbors, coworkers, our souls originate from all different origins. A soul of earthbound origin are the people, and they may be perfectly nice people. They go to school, they go to college, they get married, they have kids, they buy a house, they buy a car, they retire, they go to Florida. Good lives, normal lives, fine. They just don't do anything extra that puts some life back into the world. There are other souls, sometimes referred to as light workers. Those are the souls that come from some other different realms, and they lead the same types of lives, but they're very interested in helping people, the environment, all aspects of spirituality, healing, things like that. So I'd like to just touch on this a little, because I think what you consider supernatural, you're going to find very, very normal. So I have here a few things I just want to share with you. This is a book. It's a pocket-sized book by one of my favorite authors. This is Dr. Doreen Virtue, and it's called Realms of the Earth Angels. You can get this, I think, pretty much at any Barnes & Noble. So basically what she talks about is souls that have incarnated through different realms. They're here in human form. Let's not forget that. We're all in human form. But have a higher mission. And that's a lot of what Angels, Fairies, and Witches is about, getting you to find your higher mission. So the first chapter, I'm really going to wait until Laura gets back to discuss this, but it's the incarnated angels, okay? In terms of the incarnated angels, their overall energy would be considered sweet and loving. They have the physical characteristics of beautiful cherubic faces with large bodies. They tend to focus on healing and service work, keeping relationships peaceful and happy. These are also members of the group that tend to with someone's potential and try to coach the person to greatness. Moreover, they tend to have codependent relationships with addicts and alcoholics, and they tend to stay in relationships much longer than they ever would. That's basically the realm of the incarnated angels. So next up we have the elementals, which are the fairies, pixies, gnomes. Their overall energy is warm and playful and a little bit mischievous. And as I'm going through these categories, think about yourself or think about even people that you know. Physically, the incarnated elementals look like larger versions of fairies. So, the little upturned nose, sometimes they'll have the red hair or freckles. Just no matter how old they may be, they still maintain a look of youth and playfulness. The elementals tend to focus on teaching, entertaining, the arts, and above all else, the environment. Next, we have the star people. This particular realm, their overall energy is sort of helpful, but cool and detached. They have a definite interest in astronomy and planetary things. Their physical characteristics is they tend to be tall and lanky, often with very thin bodies, like a swimmer's build. And they tend to focus on energy healing, particularly Reiki, technological advances, and being helpful as needed. They don't jump in there and try to rescue everybody like the incarnated angels. They're a little bit more detached. And the last realm that I'm going to talk about from this book are the wise ones. Their energy is very serious, intense, and kind of regal. Physically, front page, they tend to have long faces, faraway expressions. tend to wear dark-colored flowing shirts and dresses, and have often long and sometimes prematurely gray hair. My luck, right? Oh, actually, I wanted to mention earlier, you don't have to change your channel. Change the color dial. My hair is purple, but we'll get into that. So this is the Earth Angels from Dr. Doreen Virtue. Moreover, I want to describe some of the things that Hollywood has decided to make movies about recently. Werewolves, vampires, fairies, and witches. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about a werewolf's energy. And again, think about yourself, think about the people you know. Werewolves. Their circle of friends are small. They're not easy to get to know. They're viewed as very private. Given the choice, they'd rather stay home than be out in a crowd. They are not easily intimidated and seldom care what others think of them. Reality is that werewolves are very loyal to the select few. They don't talk a lot, but when they do, it's certainly worth listening. They have good instincts and are known to be people watchers. They're very protective. They can be considered moody and dark and don't really care to explain themselves, but that's really just the outer shell. Vampires are always noticed. They think fast, act even faster. They are proud. They never shy away from risk. They're very self-confident. While at times they appear as stoic as werewolves, the vampires are actually bold creatures that don't mind the spotlight. Sometimes they're often seen as somebody who's hard to love, but their protective nature tends to make those they care about make them feel very needed. They have a tendency to be honest, sometimes maybe too honest. When provoked, they hold nothing back. Thing to remember about the vampires is that they were not born this strong, but were forced to become that way because of some traumatic experience in life. And I'm just giving you a very brief recap of all of these personality types. The next one are fairies. They're people persons? People pleasers. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. They can be very colorful and striking. They're mischievous. They're fun. Everybody loves them. But while their personality makes them come off as someone you'd never have to fear, in truth, their ability to read people and to subtly control other people's emotions can be one of the most frightening powers of all. I know this to be true, but in a different way, nothing negative. None of this is anything negative. With the fairy energy, they can walk into a room and with a few words, a look, perhaps a touch, they can raise people's level of inspiration, motivation. They bring about joy to every situation. And like I was talking about with the incarnated elementals, I talk mostly about the fairies, but it's not chiefly about that. Very, very concerned with environmental issues. These people have to be out in nature. They may have to live by the ocean, by the forest. It's really important for them to spend as much time in fresh air as possible. That was the fairies. And now the witches, which I could talk about forever, but I'm just going to read what it says here. Witches can be flirty, colorful, and loads of fun. Oh, it's so true. Or they can be dark and mysterious and a little frightening, all depending on their mood. They believe in magic and fate, in good and evil. They have a knack for the dramatic that shows in everything from their language to their apparel, apparently also to their hair color. Their moods are often dictated by uncontrollable forces that no one else understands. You all hear that? That's not me being bitchy. That is the uncontrollable forces that are dictating my moods. Well, at least that's what I'm going to claim. They're the ones reading tea leaves, tarot cards, making predictions for others. They have good internal instincts. They're sensitive to others' feelings. They have specific likes and dislikes and aren't afraid to tell you about them. They have the ability to like people for who they are, and for that reason they have all types of friends. They'll love you in spite of your flaws, but that doesn't mean they won't point out your defects. And love this last sentence. A witch can take an ordinary day or an event and turn it into something exciting and memorable just by turning on her charm. Love that. Love that. For more information, I don't know if you want to zoom in on this. It's on the internet somewhere. It's capital C, Hunters, CC Hunters, Supernatural Personality Traits. I don't know who CC Hunter is, maybe an author but, and there was more than this. I just kind of had pulled this off in a rush. So, again, I'm going back to the original question of do fairies exist? They absolutely do, but they also exist in human form as well. So start thinking about yourself, your family, your friends, people that you know. If you find that somebody fits in any of these categories, and sometimes you can actually be in more than one. I definitely have sort of two components, part witch, well, witch is the predominant, but also some fairy aspect as well, because truly witchcraft is very serious to the point that it can almost be kind of somber. Nothing dark, nothing bad, but, a little. Whereas the fairy element comes in that's more fun, more lighter energy. The reason that I wear this fairy dust that I make, and in coming episodes I'll show you how to make it, very easy. I wear it as a reminder to myself, what is the message of the fairies, Put more light into the world. Smile more, frown less. Lighten up, people. Don't take everything so seriously. Have a glass of wine for breakfast on a Saturday. Ooh, did I say that? I've never done that before. But start looking around you and see that the people that are really concerned with humanity, environment, helping, healing, giving, start to notice if they're not also having some of these supernatural traits. Can guarantee they do. Laura has this exercise. I should probably leave this to her, that she shows people. She is mostly an incarnated angel. Mostly. And what she shows her clients is you kind of go up against a wall and you go like that to see if you can feel your wings. It's an interesting trick. Try it at home. I don't know if I'm giving you all the detail. But put your back up against whatever wall is in your house. Kind of rub your shoulders around, or maybe be about an inch away. It's been suggested that if you have fairy wings, they'll feel like big feathery wings. If you have more fairy realm in you, they're almost smaller, like butterfly wings. And if you're a witch, you don't have wings at all, and apparently no halo.